In a recent monologue, Tucker Carlson went after GOP leader Kevin McCarthy for protecting big tech and highlighting the new FTC chief, Lina Khan, who's been a vocal critic of Silicon Valley. Let's take a listen.
So you'd think that House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy would be pretty excited by all of this. He's a capitalist. He's been telling you he's very worried about the dangers of big tech monopolies for years, and now there's bipartisan support to do something about it. Weirdly, though, Kevin McCarthy is opposed to this antitrust legislation. Why is that? How can that be? We're not sure. Here's one potential explanation. Kevin McCarthy's top outside advisor is a man called Jeff Miller. Who is Jeff Miller? Well, he's a registered lobbyist for Amazon and Apple. The problem is that the tech monopolies are actually a threat to the country. If you care about democracy, you need to break up the monopolies. If you care about the economy, same thing. McCarthy's not doing that. Instead, he's busy tweeting about Juneteenth. Maybe he doesn't want you to notice that an FTC commissioner, appointed by Democrats, by the way, is doing more to break up these monopolies than the Republican leader of the House of Representatives. And that is a very depressing fact. Let's hope it changes soon.
Journalist Glenn Greenwald praised Representative Illhan Omar for retweeting Tucker's monologue. Here's what Glenn had to say. Interesting and encouraging. Rep. Omar retweeting praise for a Tucker Carlson segment about the new, excellent FTC chief. When you view politics as an instrument to foster positive change rather than a self-branding game, you look for ways to create coalitions, not shun allies. Oh, Robby, what do you think about this, man? Tucker is depressed over McCarthy, and we've got Illhan Omar retweeting Tucker Carlson, and then Glenn Greenwald praising Rep. Illhan Omar. What is next? I'm a little nervous about this whole thing right now.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of strange bedfellows here because it's Tucker and Ilhan Omar and Lina Khan, who's this very progressive new FTC chief. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to probably agree with them. So my role here is to be so I'm skeptical of many things that big tech does. I disagree with a lot of them. I criticize a lot of their content moderation decisions. I am wary of them. I still don't think the solutions outlined here are going to be good for conservatives, which might be why Kevin McCarthy is against it rather than he's being lobbied to be against it. I don't see how breaking up these companies solves the problem that most conservatives have with big tech is the censorship issue. Mm-hmm. It's not they don't want companies to be big and successful. Maybe liberals don't like that, but conservatives don't care if companies are big or successful. I don't think they care that they're being censored, that Facebook has its thumbs on the scales for liberal speech. Twitter, some others, that Amazon, has removed certain conservative books. I'm very concerned about all those things too, and I call them out. But breaking the companies up doesn't fix that, because then you just have a bunch of small companies that all do the same thing and, in fact, do it more. Because, for instance, Mark Zuckerberg is more committed to free speech, warts and all, than a lot of his underlings. It's his staff that wants to really, really suppress conservative views. So you'd break up the company, you'd have more people other than Mark Zuckerberg in charge of it, and I think what would result is just more censorship of conservative speech. So that's my criticism of the default break-up big tech mindset. I don't see how it fixes problems.
Well, let me offer a counterpoint to that, and I would say that there was recently an interesting story that Facebook's algorithm was actually promoting the Daily Caller as one of their number one kind of content pieces.
Yes!
So it's pretty interesting. But what I would say is what you described is exactly the solution potentially to censorship of liberal or conservative voices, neither of which should be widely censored unless they're, advocating for violence against people or something of that nature. Right now, if Facebook decides to turn off something because of its algorithm, or Google does the same thing, it becomes non-existent because they dominate the market. They're, almost 2/3 of the market in terms of advertising dollars, which means that they have the power to continually grow and become bigger and bigger and bigger. If we are able to break those up, if we are able to then create a market where some of these advertising dollars are spread around, which is how these places actually make money, you have the opportunity for a conservative or an independent or a liberal left-leaning information news site, whatever you want to call it, to actually have a larger place in the market. And that's a good thing. Right now, again, as I said, if one of these two or three or Amazon decides to, turn off any kind of thought, it's done. We can't see it anymore. And that's a fundamental problem, I think, generally for everybody. And I don't care if you're a conservative and or liberal. And it's why we see, Illhan Omar, of all people, retweeting, Tucker Carlson, which I just find wildly hilarious.
Right.
And, Tucker points out that the reason that maybe Kevin McCarthy is against it is because one of his chief advisors is actually a lobbyist for Amazon.
Yeah, but I think there's a danger in getting duped here. Like, Lina Khan doesn't care about conservative speech rights on social media. Like, she's a progressive, which is fine. She's transparent about that. I'm not like demonizing all progressive beliefs or something, but she generally, doesn't want companies to be really big. She's like opposed to the bigness aspect of it. I'm not particularly opposed to the bigness necessarily. I want to, solve problems. I'm concerned about censorship, but I don't think there's not going to be any federal government investigation of any of these companies that the result of which, when you have federal bureaucrats investigating these companies, they're never going to investigate these companies along the lines of the criticisms that conservatives have of them. So I think many conservatives feel aggrieved by big tech, and they're lashing out, and they want to punish these companies for some of the admittedly terrible decisions these companies have made. But they're going to end up hurting these companies, and then there's going to be less conservative speech online. We're going to, if we got rid of these companies, we broke them up. I don't want to go back to some previous era. Before social media, there were fewer avenues for alternative speech, for contrarian or different speech. I don't want to go back to some media landscape that's dominated by just a couple news channels or newspapers that are, republishing some idiotic Washington, New York consensus. The media ecosystem is more fractured, and there's more diversity. Like you just said, on Facebook, the top articles are routinely Daily Wire, Daily Caller, Ben Shapiro, Dan Bongino, Fox News. The current landscape has actually allowed for a lot of speech to thrive that is outside the traditional media's bubble, which is why, by the way, the traditional media is the most aggressive supporter of regulating social media. Nobody hates Facebook more than the New York Times. Nobody wants to break up these companies more than the progressives who staff these newspapers, because they are rivals. They view these competitors as having disrupted their business in a way that I think is positive.
Except for maybe Tucker Carlson, who is clearly not a fan of these
Tucker
big
doesn't
companies.
agree.
And look, I would say obviously, and from the examples that we used here, this is a place where Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals are coming together, and we'll probably see some action on this. I would be very surprised if we don't see some kind of breakup or some kind of regulation of these big tech industries, because in the same way that conservatives are concerned about being drowned out in, conservative speech being drowned out, so are liberals, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you repeat all of those things you just said, which are all of these conservative outlets leading in the Facebook algorithm right now. I just want to say that tomorrow we have an amazing show for you all. Panelists Michael Starr Hopkins and Amy Tarkanian are with us for Team Rising.
And Huffington Post reporter Daniel Morans discusses the New York City mayoral race. He's been on the campaign trail doing some great reporting, so we're really looking forward to having him with us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for hanging out, y'all.